Hello, and welcome to Dig a Podcast, a show that tells the in-depth story behind the songs of the greatest band that is, was, and ever will be, the Beatles. In this season, Season 1, we will explore the Beatles' first LP, Introducing the Beatles, or our UK listeners would know it as Please Please Me. Introducing the Beatles was originally scheduled for a July 1963 release, but came out on the 10th of January 1964 on VJ Records, whereas Please Please Me was released on the 23rd of March 1963 on EMI's Parlophone label. Let's continue on our journey through Introducing the Beatles with
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
A Taste of Honey. There were a lot of beat bands competing for prominence in the Liverpool area in the late 50s and 60s. Every one of them was striving to edge out the others with a distinctiveness that would set them apart and get them noticed. Any gimmick that would get the band more attention or get them more bookings would be considered. The one undeniable fact about the Beatles is that they had a love of music. Not just rock and roll, but all varieties of music. McCartney in particular had a fondness for ballads, even standards from his father's era. As Paul relates, the Beatles weren't ashamed of those leanings, and would incorporate the ballads into their setlist so they could be a bit more varied. This resulted in the Beatles getting more bookings, being that many gigs required them to perform ballady material in order to entertain more adult audiences that were quite anti-rock and roll, such as in their early Hamburg days. Performing crooners like Till There Was You, Ain't She Sweet, and My Funny Valentine were not beneath them to perform. In fact, they quite enjoyed playing them. These became the late-night cabaret numbers that showed that they weren't just another rock and roll band. With this in mind, McCartney would sing these ballads to add a touch of sophistication to their stage act. Among the songs they found to fit this need was the ballad A Taste of Honey, which was recently recorded and released by Lenny Welsh in 1962. In order to add this touch of sophistication to their first album, George Martin was keen to take time to make this very adult-sounding song fit into this teenage album to show their musical abilities. Possibly, this would impress more than just teenagers that made up their audiences at the time. Songwriting history. The song A Taste of Honey has actually been described as one of the most commercially successful songs in the history of the music and recording industry. This conclusion has been drawn from the song being recorded by upwards of 250 artists internationally, which includes its songwriter Rick Marlowe, Tony Bennett, Barbra Streisand, Johnny Mathis, and of course, the Beatles. Its most prominent success has been as an instrumental, with versions by Martin Denny and Victor Feldman Quartet, and, most notably, Herb Alpert and the Tijuana Brass. Herb Alpert's 1965 version rose to number 7 on the Billboard Pop charts, and won the Grammy Award for the Record of the Year. It has also previously won a Grammy Award for Best Instrumental Theme in 1962. The song was apparently inspired by the 1958 English play of the same name, which enjoyed immense success as it hit Broadway in 1960, starring Angela Lansbury and Billy D. Williams, and as an award-winning movie in 1961. The controversial subject matter, which included single motherhood, sexuality, race, and even homosexuality, reflected the social change in attitude that were taking place in Britain during the late 50s and early 60s. Songwriter Rick Marlowe was actually no more than just a songwriter. He has had a long-standing television acting career, appearing in as many as 75 shows throughout his lifetime. His first appearance was in the TV show The Lawless Years in 1959, and continued throughout the 60s in shows such as Bonanza, Sea Hunt, Dante, Lawman, and Ripcord. In the 70s, he appeared numerous times on Hawaii Five-0, and in the 80s on Magnum P.I. as late as 1984. Rick has also pursued a singing career, appearing throughout the years in Las Vegas, New York, Florida, Hollywood, and Palm Springs, California, where he now resides. The success of A Taste of Honey, with its 150 million copies sold worldwide, has been his claim to fame, and with the continued interest and sales of the Beatles' music, will no doubt allow him to enjoy his royalty checks for the rest of his life. Bobby Scott was an accomplished jazz musician who studied at the La Follette School of Music in New York City in 1945. He had become an accomplished pianist and violinist, as well as mastering the vibes, accordion, clarinet, cello, drums, and bass. Bobby turned professional as early as age 11 and was working with Louis Prima by the age of 15. By the mid-50s, he was working with Gene Krupa and Tony Scott and performing at various prestigious jazz festivals. Bobby decided to discontinue performing in the late 50s to concentrate on composing and teaching musical theory and harmony, as well as continue his studies in music. It was during this period that Scott co-authored the song A Taste of Honey with Rick Marlowe, as well as released 2 albums in 1960. He also co-wrote the ever-popular song He Ain't Heavy, He's My Brother with Bob Russell, who was dying of cancer, which was taken to the number 7 spot of the Billboard Pop Chart in 1970 by another British invasion group, the Hollies. The original version of the song was taken into the top 20 in 1970 by Neil Diamond. The song has also been recorded by Cher, Olivia Newton-John, the Osmonds, Bill Medley, as well as many other artists throughout the years. Scott also dabbled in writing musical scores for movies such as Slaves 1969, Joe 1970, and Who Says I Can't Ride a Rainbow 1971. He gradually returned to performing and recording, and in the 80s issued a Nat King Cole tribute album. He unfortunately succumbed to cancer himself and on November the 5th, 1990, died of lung cancer. His musical legacy is felt to this day, especially in connection with his 2 most famous songs, A Taste of Honey and He Ain't Heavy, He's My Brother, appearing in many movies and television commercials throughout the 80s, 90s, and until today. Of the many versions of A Taste of Honey that has been recorded, the version released by Lenny Welch in 1962 is what was most influential to the Beatles. They patterned their arrangement of the music after this recording, which, although missing the American top 40 charts, made a slightly bigger impact in Britain, although it failed to make the British charts either. Lenny started his recording career in 1958 on Decca Records, which was the same label that was first to release a Beatles single in the US, My Bonnie by Tony Sheridan and the Beat Brothers in 1962. After 2 dismal selling singles on Decca, he was introduced to Archie Blair, the owner of Cadence Records. Archie signed him to his label, and after releasing several modest-selling singles, including A Taste of Honey, he hit number 4 on the Billboard pop charts with Since I Fell For You in January of 1964, just before Beatlemania took over the States. Cadence Records then re-released his version of Ebb Tide, which scored a modest follow-up hit in April of 1965, number 25, and it seemed that Lenny was on his way to becoming another Johnny Mathis-style crooner. Two major setbacks then occurred. Archie Blair unexpectedly folded Cadence Records in September of 1964, and then Lenny was drafted. Although he obtained a new recording deal with Cap Records in 1965, very little success occurred while he was serving for his country. After his service time was complete, he struggled to continue his career, but mostly in vain. His only return to the American Top 40 was his slow ballad version of Neil Sedaka's Breaking Up Is Hard to Do, which peaked at number 34 in 1970 on the Commonwealth United label. Sedaka liked the version enough to record his own ballad version of the song 5.5 years later, taking it into the top 10. Lenny struggled for a time with his own record label, but after it failed, resorted to leaving the music business and driving a cab in New York City to pay back those who invested in his failed record company. Now living in Los Angeles, he has found himself in demand doing oldies shows and performances on cruise ships. Along with his royalty payments for Since I Fell For You, Lenny Welch is continuing to live his initial dream of being a performer in the music business. Recording history. The Beatles' recording of A Taste of Honey was also a part of the 12.5-hour recording session that occurred on February 11th, 1963, to complete their first British album. As can be noted by the order of songs recorded on this day, the emphasis was primarily on recording original material at the insistence of Brian Epstein and the band. The only exception to this rule was the recording of this song, which was the only cover song recorded before the evening session began. When the afternoon session began in Studio 2 of EMI Studios at 2:30 p.m, A Taste of Honey was the first song recorded. 5 takes of the song were recorded, with the Beatles all playing their own instruments live simultaneously with lead and backing vocals. The 5th take was temporarily considered as best. After the next song, Do You Want to Know a Secret, was deemed as complete. Attentions focused again on A Taste of Honey. At approximately 3:45 p.m, 2 overdubs were performed by McCartney in order to double-track his lead vocals. This effect entailed superimposing an identical performance on top of another, creating a fuller sound because of not being able to perform the second performance in perfect synchronization with the first performance. McCartney was instructed by George Martin to double-track his vocals in 2 places, each time the bridge of the song occurred. The first bridge overdub became take 6, and the second bridge made it take 7, which then was considered the final take, completing the song. This recording technique, which was new to the Beatles at this point, was used at the band's insistence in a majority of the songs recorded within the next 2 years, and sparingly thereafter as well. As for this first album, this was the only song which contained double tracking. No mixes of the song were done on this day. Both the mono and stereo mixes of the song were done during the mastering session for the album, which occurred on February 25th. Both mixes were done using take 7, which included both of the McCartney double tracking overdubs. Then, while jamming out renditions of old songs on January 22nd, 1969, in the Apple Studios during the rehearsal what was to become the Let It Be album and film, the Beatles attempted A Taste of Honey for a quick run-through. This attempt, however, fell apart very quickly and understandably has never been officially released. Thanks for listening to Dig a Podcast. You can subscribe to our podcast on Spreaker, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or any other podcasting platform. This has been a Team Wilco production. Until next time, if you know what I mean. See what I did? No? Okay.